Sterling Blackwood adjusted his silk tie, looking down his nose at the man sitting at the defense table. To Sterling, Marcus Thorne was just another statistic, uneducated, broke, and guilty by appearance. Sterling had the judge in his pocket, and the verdict already written in his mind. He smirked, mocking Marcus's silence, mistaking patience for stupidity. But Sterling forgot the first rule of the jungle. The most dangerous predators don't roar before they strike. He didn't know that the man in the shabby clothes wasn't a victim. He was the bait. And when Marcus finally reached into his jacket, he didn't pull out a plea deal. He pulled out a badge that would burn Sterling's world to the ground. The air in Courtroom 4B of the grandiose Superior Court of Fulton County smelled of lemon polish and old fear. It was a smell Sterling Blackwood loved. It was the scent of victory. Sterling checked his reflection in the screen of his phone. At 45, he was the picture of legal dominance. His bespoke navy suit cost more than the defendant's car, assuming the defendant even owned one. His hair was silvered at the temples, a calculated aesthetic that screamed experience. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a shark in Italian leather. He glanced to his left. Sitting at the plaintiff's table was his client, Gregory Holloway. Holloway was a massive real estate developer, the kind of man who bulldozed orphanages to build luxury condos and slept like a baby afterwards. Today, they were here to evict a nuisance. Sterling turned his gaze to the defense table. Sitting there, alone, was Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a large black man, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded grey flannel shirt and work boots that had seen better decades, let alone days. He sat with a stillness that Sterling found irritating. Usually, defendants in Marcus's position were fidgeting, sweating, or frantically flipping through the public defender's pamphlets. Marcus just sat there, his hands clasped loosely on the empty mahogany table. No notepad, no pen, no lawyer. "Your Honor," Sterling's voice boomed, projecting that buttery baritone that had charmed juries for 20 years. "We are ready to proceed. It seems the defendant has chosen to represent himself. A choice, I might add, that is as ill-advised as his squatting on my client's property." Judge Arthur Pellington, a man whose face looked like a road map of vascular bursting, peered over his spectacles. Pellington and Sterling played golf every Sunday at the country club of the South. This wasn't a trial, it was a formality. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Pellington sighed, sounding bored already. "Do you understand the proceedings today? You are facing eviction and damages totaling $150,000 for illegal tenancy and property defacement. Do you not have counsel?" Marcus looked up. His eyes were dark, unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was a low rumble, soft but carrying to the back of the room. "No, Your Honor, I'll speak for myself." Sterling suppressed a chuckle. He leaned over to Holloway. "Watch this," he whispered. "I'll have him crying in 10 minutes. We'll have the eviction order signed by lunch." "Just get it done, Sterling," Holloway grunted, checking his Rolex. "I have a demolition crew on standby for tomorrow morning." Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't walk to the podium. He prowled the center of the room. He wanted to make a show of this. He wanted to humiliate this man who dared to delay a multi-million-dollar project. "Mr. Thorne," Sterling began, not even looking at Marcus, but smiling at the court reporter. "Let's keep this simple for you. You reside at 4200 Oakwood Drive, correct?" "I stay there," Marcus said. "You stay there," Sterling repeated, making air quotes with his fingers, eliciting a few snickers from the few law students sitting in the gallery. "Language is important, Mr. Thorne. You don't own it. You don't rent it. You just exist there, like a fungus." "Objection," Marcus said quietly. Judge Pellington frowned. On what grounds? Argumentative, Marcus said. And insulting. Overruled. Pellington waved his hand dismissively. Mr. Blackwood is merely establishing the nature of your occupancy. What's your tone, Mr. Thorne? Sterling smirked. It was too easy. Thank you, Your Honour. Now, Mr. Thorne, my client, Mr. Halloway, purchased the deed to that property 6 months ago in a foreclosure auction. You have refused to vacate. You have refused to communicate. You are, by definition, a squatter. An uneducated man might not understand property law, but surely you understand what "get out" means. Sterling paused for effect, waiting for the outburst. He wanted Marcus to get angry. He wanted the angry black man stereotype to flare up so he could point at it and say, "See? This is why he doesn't belong in our neighborhood." But Marcus didn't flinch. He just watched Sterling. It was the way a wolf watches a deer prancing in a meadow. "I understand the law," Marcus said calmly. "Do you?" Sterling laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Did you go to Harvard? Yale? Maybe a night class at the community center? Because the paperwork you filed, handwritten I might add, was barely legible. You cited statutes that don't exist. You're wasting the court's time because you're looking for a payout. You think if you sit there and look formidable, Mr. Halloway will write you a check to go away." Sterling walked right up to the defense table, placing his hands on the wood, leaning in close to Marcus. He lowered his voice, but kept it loud enough for the microphone to catch. "Here is the reality, Mr. Thorne. You are out of your depth. You are a relic in a gentrifying world. You have no money, no power, and clearly no education. Why don't you just pack your bags and go back to whatever hole you crawled out of?" The courtroom went silent. Even the stenographer paused. It was a step too far, even for Sterling. Marcus slowly unclasped his hands. He leaned forward, matching Sterling's proximity. "Are you done performing, Mr. Blackwood?" Marcus asked. Sterling blinked, taken aback by the sudden sharpness in the man's diction. "I'm just getting started," Sterling sneered, straightening up. "I call my first witness, Mr. Gregory Halloway." The examination of Gregory Halloway was a masterclass in softballs. Sterling lobbed questions, and Halloway knocked them out of the park, painting a picture of a benevolent businessman terrorized by a dangerous squatter. "He threatened my surveyors," Halloway lied, his face flushing with fake indignation. "We tried to inspect the foundation, and this man stood on the porch with a shovel. We were terrified." Sterling nodded sympathetically. "A shovel? A weapon? And did he say anything?" He said, "This isn't your land," Halloway said. "Just delusional." "Thank you, Mr. Halloway." Sterling turned to Marcus. "Your witness, Mr. Thorne. If you even know how to cross-examine." Marcus stood up. He didn't have notes. He walked around the table and stood in the center of the room. He looked at Halloway. "Mr. Halloway," Marcus said. His voice had changed. The slightly southern drawl was gone, replaced by a clipped, precise neutrality. "You purchased the deed on March 15th via a shell company called Obsidian Holdings, correct?" Halloway squinted. "Yes, that's standard business. And Obsidian Holdings is registered in the Cayman Islands, but operates out of a P.O. box in Delaware." Sterling stood up immediately. "Objection. Relevance. My client's business structure is not on trial here." "It goes to the validity of the deed, Your Honor," Marcus said to the judge. "If the purchasing entity doesn't legally exist in the state of Georgia, the transaction is void." Judge Pellington looked annoyed. He tapped his pen. "I'll allow it, but make it quick, Mr. Thorne. Don't play lawyer." Marcus turned back to Halloway. "Is Obsidian Holdings licensed to purchase residential deeds in Georgia?" "My lawyers handle that," Halloway snapped. "I'm a developer, not a clerk." "Right," Marcus said. "You're a developer. You developed the Riverwalk complex in 2022, didn't you? Objection! Sterling shouted. Relevance! It establishes a pattern of behavior, Marcus countered instantly. At Riverwalk, 3 tenants were forcibly removed under false foreclosure notices, the same notices I received. Sustained, Pellington barked. Stick to this case, Mr. Thorne, or I will hold you in contempt. Marcus didn't argue. He just nodded, as if he expected that ruling. Mr. Holloway, you claim I threatened you with a shovel on April 4th. What time was that? Around 2 p.m., Holloway said confidently. 2 p.m., Marcus repeated. You're sure? Absolutely. I wrote it down. Marcus reached into the back pocket of his jeans. Sterling tensed, half expecting a weapon, but Marcus pulled out a folded piece of paper. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Defense Exhibit A, Marcus said. Sterling scoffed. He can't just pull papers out of his pocket. It's a receipt, Marcus said, walking it to the bailiff. From the Fulton County Clerk's office, dated April 4th, time stamped 1:55 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. I was paying a parking ticket downtown. Unless I can teleport, I wasn't on the porch with a shovel. The bailiff handed the receipt to the judge. Pellington looked at it, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. It was an official government document. It was irrefutable. Holloway's face went pale. He looked at Sterling. Sterling realized he had been sloppy. He hadn't vetted the lie. He assumed Marcus was a nobody who wouldn't have receipts. A clerical error regarding the time, Sterling interjected smoothly. My client was traumatized. Time is fluid in those moments. Trauma makes you check a clock and write it down wrong? Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. Move on, Mr. Thorne, Pellington grumbled, though he looked at Holloway with a hint of suspicion now. The lie was too obvious. No further questions for this witness, Marcus said, sitting back down. Sterling felt a prickle of sweat on his neck. That wasn't luck. The specific question about the shell company, the perfectly timed alibi. This guy knew what he was doing. He's had help, Sterling thought. Some legal aid clinic told him what to say. That's all. Sterling decided to stop playing with his food. He needed to crush this now. The plaintiff calls the defendant, Marcus Thorne, to the stand. This was it. The kill shot. Sterling was going to destroy him on the stand. Marcus walked to the witness box. He took the oath with a solemnity that unsettled the court reporter. He sat down, the old wood chair creaking under his frame. Sterling approached him, holding a thick binder. Mr. Thorne, Sterling began, his voice dripping with condescension. Let's talk about you. You have no employment record for the last 5 years. No tax returns filed under the name Marcus Thorne in this state. No credit score. To the modern world, you are a ghost. How do you pay for food? Begging? Stealing? I have savings, Marcus said. Savings? Sterling laughed. From what? We ran a background check. You were in the military 20 years ago. Dishonorable discharge. Honorable? Marcus corrected. Medical retirement. Sure. And since then? Drifting? You found an empty house in a nice neighborhood and decided to camp out. You thought because it was in probate, no one would notice. I have a lease, Marcus said. A fake lease. Sterling slammed his hand on the railing. Written on a napkin. Signed by a dead man. Signed by the previous owner, Mr. Henderson, 3 days before he died, Marcus said. It's a 10-year lease. Mr. Henderson had dementia, Sterling countered, though he knew this was a grey area in the case file. He wasn't of sound mind. You took advantage of a dying old man. You preyed on him, just like you're preying on the court's patience today. Sterling walked back to his table and picked up a document. Mr. Thorne, I have here an affidavit from the Neighborhood Association. They say you bring unsavory characters to the house at late hours. Black SUVs, men in suits, drug deals." Marcus actually smiled, a small, cold smile. "Not drug deals. Then what? What does an unemployed man with no education do with men in SUVs at midnight? We talk. About what? Who to rob next?" Sterling played to the prejudice in the room. He saw Judge Pellington nodding along. "We talk about the law," Marcus said. Sterling stopped. The courtroom went quiet. "The law," Sterling repeated, deadpan. "You talk about the law." "Yes." "Let me guess. You're a sovereign citizen," Sterling mocked. "You think the laws of the United States don't apply to you because of some flag fringe theory?" "The laws apply to me very strictly," Marcus said. "More strictly than they apply to you, apparently." "Excuse me?" Sterling bristled. "You failed to file a motion of discovery before this trial, Mr. Blackwood," Marcus said calmly. "You assumed I wouldn't have any evidence, so you didn't ask for it. That's a violation of Georgia Civil Practice Act 9-11-26. Sterling froze. The specific citation hung in the air like a gunshot. "You also failed to disclose your financial conflict of interest with Judge Pellington," Marcus continued, his voice rising just an octave. "Specifically, the joint investment in the Blue Heron golf course development, which Mr. Holloway is also a primary investor in." Judge Pellington's gavel fell out of his hand. It clattered onto the bench with a loud crack. The colour drained from Sterling's face. That is preposterous slander. I move to strike." "Is it?" Marcus reached into his jacket again. Sterling flinched. "Bailiff, he's reaching!" The bailiff moved his hand to his belt, stepping forward. Marcus moved slowly. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. He placed it on the stand. "I'm not uneducated, Mr. Blackwood," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a terrifying register. "And I'm not a squatter. You asked about the men in the black SUVs. You asked about my lack of a digital footprint?" Marcus stood up in the witness box. He looked tall, looming. "You didn't find the employment record because my record is classified level 5 clearance." "What are you talking about?" Sterling stammered, looking at the judge, who was now sweating profusely. "You asked for my credentials," Marcus said. "I think it's time I showed you." He opened the envelope. The envelope didn't contain a lease. It didn't contain a handwritten letter from a dead man. It contained a leather wallet, worn at the edges, the kind carried by men who worked, not men who sat in offices. Marcus flipped it open. A gold shield caught the overhead fluorescent lights, flashing like a warning beacon. Next to it was an ID card with a holographic seal. "My name is Marcus Thorne," he said, his voice booming without the need for a microphone. "But for the last 6 months, I have been operating under a covered identity. I am a senior special agent with the Department of Justice Public Integrity Section." Sterling Blackwood felt his knees turn to water. He gripped the edge of the plaintiff's table so hard his knuckles turned white. This is a trick, a fake badge. He bought it online." "Bailiff," Marcus said, not taking his eyes off Judge Pellington. "Please inspect the credentials, and while you're at it, call the number on the back of the card. It routes directly to the Washington field office." The bailiff, a young man named Deputy Jenkins, who looked terrified, gingerly took the wallet. He looked at the badge, then at the judge. "Your Honor, it looks real. It's got the federal seal." "It's a prop," Holloway shouted, standing up, his face red. "He's a squatter. He's lying. Evict him." "Sit down, Mr. Holloway," Marcus commanded. It wasn't a request. The authority in his voice was absolute, the kind that came from 20 years of commanding rooms much more dangerous than this one. Holloway sat. Marcus turned back to Sterling. "You called me uneducated, Mr. Blackwood. You were right about one thing. I didn't go to Harvard. I went to the University of Chicago on the GI Bill after doing 2 tours in Afghanistan as a military police investigator. I passed the bar exam in 3 states on my first try. I didn't become a corporate lawyer because I don't like bullies in suits." He walked out of the witness box, moving freely now. The judge didn't stop him. Pellington looked like he was having a cardiac event. "Why were you in the house?" Pellington croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "The house at 4200 Oakwood Drive," Marcus said, pacing in front of the bench. "It wasn't just a random foreclosure. It was the registered drop point for a money laundering scheme involving the Blue Heron Development Project. We've been watching that house for a year. We knew someone was picking up cash drops from the mailbox. We just needed to know who." Marcus stopped and pointed a finger at Holloway. "We thought it was just him, a corrupt developer skimming off the top. So I moved in. I became the squatter. I became the nuisance. I wanted to see who would come to kick me out. I wanted to see who was desperate enough to reclaim that property before the feds seized it." Marcus turned his eyes to Sterling. "And then you showed up, Mr. Blackwood. You and your aggressive tactics. You filed paperwork fast, too fast. You bypassed inspections. You tried to bribe me to leave. And when I wouldn't leave, you brought me here, to this specific courtroom." Sterling was hyperventilating. He loosened his silk tie. I was just representing my client. I have no knowledge of any criminal activity." "Don't you?" Marcus asked. "You mentioned the uneducated, handwritten motions I filed. Did you actually read them, Sterling, or did you just scoff at the handwriting?" I glanced at them." "If you had read them," Marcus said, a shark-like grin appearing on his face, "you would have noticed that the statutes I cited were actually page numbers from your own hidden ledgers." Sterling's eyes went wide. "That's right," Marcus continued. "We didn't just watch the house, we tapped the phones. We accessed the servers of Obsidian Holdings. We know that Obsidian Holdings isn't just a shell company, it's a joint venture." Marcus leaned on the plaintiff's table, invading Sterling's space. 50% owned by Gregory Holloway, and 50% owned by a blind trust. Beneficiary: Arthur Pellington. The gallery gasped. The law students in the back were furiously typing on their phones. This was the scandal of the decade happening in real time. "Lies!" Judge Pellington shrieked, standing up. "Bailiff, arrest this man. He is in contempt. He is lying in my court." Deputy Jenkins looked at the judge, then at Marcus, then at the badge still in his hand. He didn't move. "He's not lying, Artie," a new voice said from the back of the room. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung open. Standing in the doorway was a woman in a sharp grey blazer, flanked by 4 men in tactical vests marked FBI. "Agent Sarah Cole," Marcus introduced her without looking back. "She's the one who's been listening to your phone calls for the last 6 weeks, Your Honor." Agent Cole walked down the aisle, her heels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum. She carried a laptop and a portable speaker. "Judge Pellington," Cole said coolly. "Gregory Holloway, Sterling Blackwood. Please remain seated. The exits are secured." "You can't do this," Sterling stammered. "This is a civil hearing. You have no jurisdiction." "Actually," Agent Cole said, setting the speaker on the court reporter's desk. "When a civil hearing is used as an instrument to further a RICO conspiracy, it becomes federal jurisdiction. And Mr. Blackwood, you aren't just a lawyer today. You're a co-conspirator." "I am an officer of the court," Sterling yelled, sweat streaming down his face. "I demand to see a warrant." You want a warrant? Marcus asked. I have 5. 1 for the search of your office, 1 for your home, 1 for Holloway's penthouse, 1 for the judge's chambers, and 1 for your person. Sterling slumped into his chair. He looked at Holloway. Holloway was trembling, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped rat. "Play the tape, Sarah," Marcus said. Agent Cole pressed a button. The audio was crystal clear. It filled the silent courtroom. Voice 1, Sterling. "The squatter is still there, Artie. He's digging around the porch. If he finds the basement access, we're cooked." Voice 2, Judge Pellington. "Just get him out, Sterling. Use the eviction statute. I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. Fast track it. Bypass the sheriff's notice." Voice 1, Sterling. "What if he fights it? He looks like a thug." Voice 2, Judge Pellington. "He's a nobody. Just humiliate him. Make him look like trash. No one cares about a broke black man in this county. We'll have him out, bulldoze the house, and destroy the records in the basement by Friday." Voice 3, Holloway. "And the money? The $2 million in the wall safe?" Voice 1, Sterling. "Safe and sound. Once the house is down, we move the debris to the landfill and recover the box. Just get this Thorne guy out of the way." Click. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Marcus looked at Sterling. A thug? Trash? A nobody? Sterling couldn't speak. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The arrogance, the smirk, the polished veneer, it was all gone. He looked small. "You judged me by my clothes," Marcus said softly. "You judged me by my skin. You assumed that because I didn't wear a suit, I didn't have power. You assumed that because I spoke softly, I didn't know the law." Marcus walked over to the defense table where he had sat alone for the last hour. He picked up the uneducated, handwritten motion Sterling had mocked earlier. "You were right about the basement, by the way," Marcus said. "We found the safe last night. $2 million in marked bills, tied to the bribe payments for the zoning permits on the Riverwalk project. You entered the property without a warrant." Sterling tried one last desperate legal Hail Mary. "Fruit of the poisonous tree. The evidence is inadmissible." Marcus laughed. It was a genuine, hearty laugh. "Mr. Blackwood, you really weren't listening, were you? I didn't break in. I have a lease. Remember? The one you said was fake?" Marcus pulled a document from the evidence pile. "Mr. Henderson, the previous owner, was a patriot. He contacted the FBI 6 months ago when he realized Holloway was pressuring him. He signed the lease over to the Department of Justice for $1 before he passed away. I am the legal tenant. I gave myself permission to search the basement." Sterling's jaw dropped. The legal trap was perfect. There was no way out. Judge Pellington stood up, his robes looking like a costume now. I want to cut a deal. I was coerced. Sterling forced me." "Oh, shut up, Arthur," Holloway snapped. "You're the one who wanted the golf course." "Gentlemen, please," Agent Cole interrupted. "You'll have plenty of time to discuss who betrayed who in the holding cell." She nodded to the tactical team. "Take them into custody." The agents moved in. They didn't go for Marcus. They went for the bench and the plaintiff's table. Deputy Jenkins, the bailiff, looked unsure of what to do. Marcus nodded to him. "It's okay, Deputy. You're doing a good job. Just step aside." Jenkins stepped back, watching as the FBI agents handcuffed Judge Pellington. The judge was crying, actual tears running down his red face. Then they moved to Holloway, who went limp, dragged out of his chair. Finally, they came to Sterling. Sterling Blackwood stood up, trying to maintain some dignity. He smoothed his jacket. He looked at Marcus one last time. "You ruined my life," Sterling hissed. "Do you know who I am? I know senators. I know governors. This isn't over." Marcus stepped in close, nose to nose with the disgraced lawyer. "You're right, Sterling. It's not over. Because after we're done with the criminal charges, I'm going to sue you for malicious prosecution. And since I'm a lawyer, too, I'm going to represent myself." Marcus paused, letting the smirk return, but this time it was on his face. "And trust me, I'm very expensive." As the agents led Sterling away in handcuffs, the sound of the metal ratcheting tight echoed through the courtroom. But the story wasn't quite done, because karma had one more layer to peel back. The walk from Courtroom 4B to the prisoner transport bay was less than 200 yards. But for Sterling Blackwood, it felt like a descent into the underworld. Usually, when Sterling walked these marble hallways, his heels clicked with a rhythmic arrogance. He would nod at the bailiffs, wink at the clerks, and breeze past the security checkpoints with the air of a man who owned the building. Today, however, his gait was shuffled, restricted by the heavy steel chain connecting his ankles. The handcuffs bit into his wrists, pinching the skin beneath his expensive French cuffs. Deputy Jenkins, the young bailiff Sterling had ignored for years, held his upper arm with a grip that was professional, but firm. There was no sympathy in Jenkins's eyes. The hierarchy of the courthouse had flipped in a single hour. "Watch your head," Jenkins said as they reached the loading dock. It was the same phrase Sterling had heard officers say to thousands of his clients. He had never thought it would apply to him. As the heavy metal doors of the loading dock swung open, Sterling braced himself. He had texted his publicist earlier in the day, tipping them off about a landmark victory against a squatter. He had expected a few reporters to be waiting to capture his triumphant smile. The reporters were there, all right, but they weren't looking for a smile. A wall of camera flashes exploded the moment Sterling stepped into the daylight. The glare was blinding. Microphones were shoved toward him like spears. "Mr. Blackwood, is it true you laundered money for the cartel?" "Sterling, are you going to testify against Judge Pellington?" "Look here, look at the camera. How does it feel to be disbarred?" Sterling instinctively tried to raise a hand to shield his face, but the handcuffs jerked him back. He stumbled, nearly falling face first onto the concrete. A roar of laughter erupted from the press pool. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution photographer, a woman Sterling had once threatened to sue for libel, snapped the photo that would end up on the front page. Sterling Blackwood, knees buckled, hair disheveled, looking terrified. "Get him in the van," Agent Cole ordered. He was shoved into the back of a federal transport vehicle. The door slammed shut, plunging him into darkness. The air inside smelled of stale sweat, vomit, and pine cleaner. He wasn't alone. Holloway was there, curled in a ball on the bench, weeping openly. Judge Pellington was staring at the wall, muttering case law to himself like a madman. Sterling sat as far away from them as possible. He closed his eyes, praying this was a nightmare. But the vibration of the engine under his seat was real. The sirens wailing were real. The ride to the Federal Detention Center was the longest 30 minutes of his life. The Federal Detention Center in downtown Atlanta was a fortress of gray concrete and fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry hornets. This was the book in. Sterling knew the procedure on paper. He had read the reports. He had watched the dashcam footage. But reading about drowning is very different from inhaling water. "Name," the intake officer barked. He was a thick-necked man with a buzz cut who didn't look up from his computer. "Sterling Archibald Blackwood, Esgyosto," Sterling said, trying to summon a shred of dignity. "I demand to speak to the warden. There has been a mistake." The officer looked up. He stared at Sterling for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he looked at the two FBI agents standing behind Sterling. "He wants the warden," the officer deadpanned. The agents chuckled. "Strip," the officer said. "Excuse me?" Sterling recoiled. "You heard me. Clothing, jewelry, everything. In the bin. Now." Sterling's hands trembled as he undid the buttons of his bespoke navy jacket. He folded it carefully, out of habit. He removed his silk tie. An Hermes, a gift from a client he'd kept out of prison on a technicality. He slid off his Rolex Submariner. One by one, the artifacts of his identity were stripped away. Without the suit, without the watch, without the shoes that added 2 inches to his height, Sterling looked small, pale, soft. He was a man who had spent his life in climate-controlled offices, ordering salads and drinking filtered water. He wasn't built for this. The officer tossed a bundle at him. It hit him in the chest. "Put it on. Orange suits you." The jumpsuit was coarse, stiff, and smelled of industrial detergent that burned his nose. It was 3 sizes too big. He had to roll up the cuffs. He slid his feet into cheap rubber slides. "Inmate 8940, the officer said, printing a label. "That's your name now. Memorize it." Sterling was fingerprinted, the ink staining his manicured nails. Then came the mugshot. He tried to compose his face, to look defiant. But when the flash went off, he just looked broken. They didn't put him in a solitary cell. Because the facility was overcrowded, and because he wasn't considered violent, Sterling was placed in the tank, a large holding cell for new arrivals awaiting arraignment. The heavy steel door clanged shut behind him, with a sound of finality that echoed in his bones. The cell was occupied by about 20 men. The air was thick and humid. It smelled of unwashed bodies and the open toilet in the corner. Sterling stood by the door, hugging his arms to his chest, trying to make himself invisible. "Well, well," a gravelly voice rasped from the metal bench along the back wall. "Look what the cat dragged in. Or should I say, what the rat dragged in." Sterling froze. He knew that voice. He turned slowly. Sitting on the bench, picking his teeth with a fingernail, was Ray Knuckles Miller. 3 years ago, Sterling had prosecuted Ray for a racketeering charge. Ray had offered a plea deal, 5 years for information on a bigger fish. Sterling, wanting a high-profile win for his conviction rate, had rejected the deal and pushed for the maximum sentence. He had called Ray a menace to society in his closing arguments. Ray stood up. He was shorter than Sterling, but he was built like a fire hydrant, solid muscle and bad intentions. "Mr. Blackwood," Ray grinned, revealing a gap where a front tooth used to be. "I saw on the TV in the rec room. They said you got pinched. I told the boys, nah, not Blackwood. He's the guy who puts us here." The other inmates circled around. They sensed blood. In prison, a lawyer, especially a prosecutor or a high-end corporate shark, was lower on the food chain than a snitch. "It's a misunderstanding, Ray," Sterling stammered, his voice cracking. "I'll be out by morning. My firm, they're working on it." "Your firm?" Ray laughed, stepping closer. "You think those suits care about you? You're radioactive, buddy. You're burnt toast." Ray reached out and flicked the collar of Sterling's orange jumpsuit. "Nice fabric," Ray sneered. "Not quite Italian silk, is it? Remember what you said to the judge about me? You said I lacked the moral fiber to live among decent people. How's your moral fiber doing now, Sterling?" Sterling backed up until he hit the bars. "Stay back. I can help you. I can look at your appeal." "I don't need your help," Ray spat on the floor, inches from Sterling's rubber sandals. "I got a public defender. He's a good kid. Honest. Unlike you." Ray leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee. "You're lucky we're in federal holding, Blackwood. The guards watch the cameras here. But once you get to General Pop, you better learn how to fight, or learn how to pray." Ray turned and walked away, laughing. The other inmates laughed with him. Sterling slid down the wall, collapsing into a crouch. He pulled his knees to his chest. For the first time in 45 years, Sterling Blackwood cried. Not polite, silent tears, ugly, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. 6 hours later, a guard banged on the bars. "Blackwood, phone call, you got 5 minutes." Sterling scrambled up. This was it. The cavalry was coming. He dialed his wife, Victoria. They had been married for 12 years. It was a marriage of convenience and status. She liked the country club membership. He liked having a trophy on his arm at galas. "Collect call from inmate 8940, the automated voice announced. "Accept," Victoria's voice said. It was sharp, clipped. "Victoria! Thank God!" Sterling gasped into the receiver. "You need to call the partner. Tell Vance I need the retainer released. I need the best criminal defense team we have. Get me out of here." Silence on the other end. "Victoria?" "Sterling," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The FBI just left. They took the Jaguar. They put tape over the doors to your study. They served me with a freeze order on our joint accounts." I know, it's a nightmare. But we can fight it. Just call Vance." "I called Vance," Victoria said. "He told me that the firm voted an hour ago. You've been terminated for cause. Morals clause violation. You don't have a retainer anymore, Sterling. You don't have a job." Sterling felt the blood drain from his face. "But the house equity. We can use that for bail." "I spoke to my own lawyer, Sterling," Victoria said coldly. "I'm filing for divorce in the morning. I'm claiming innocent spouse relief to try and salvage what's left of my credit. I can't be tied to you, not with what they're saying on the news." "Victoria, please. I'm your husband." "No," she said. "You were an investment, and you crashed. Don't call here again." Click. The dial tone hummed in his ear. He stood there, holding the receiver until the guard snatched it from his hand. "Time's up, 8940. The night passed in a blur of sleepless terror. Every noise made him jump. Every shout from down the hall sounded like a threat. Morning brought no relief. He was shackled again, chained to 6 other men, including Holloway, who looked catatonic, and marched through a tunnel to the federal magistrate court. This wasn't the mahogany-paneled superior court with Judge Pellington. This was a basement courtroom, smelling of lemon polish and despair. It was a processing factory for the damned. When Sterling's name was called, he shuffled to the podium. He instinctively looked for his legal team. He expected a phalanx of associates. Instead, a young woman with frizzy hair and coffee stains on her blouse approached the defense table. She dropped a heavy accordion folder with a thud. "Ms. Davis, appointed for the defendant." She sighed, rubbing her temples. She didn't even look at Sterling. "Ms. Davis," Sterling whispered frantically, "I need to request a bail hearing. I have significant ties to the community. I am not a flight risk." She looked at him then. Her eyes were tired, dark circles underneath them. She looked like she had slept in her office. "Mr. Blackwood, right?" she said, flipping through a file. "I read your sheet. RICO charges, money laundering, conspiracy, judicial bribery. The government has you on tape. They have the money. They have the judge flipping on you. You're not getting bail. The feds argue you have offshore accounts and are a high flight risk. You're staying inside. But I'm a lawyer. I can help you with the strategy." She let out a short, dry laugh. "Mr. Blackwood, you're not a lawyer today. You're a defendant. And honestly, you're my 42nd case this week. So here's the strategy. You stand there. You plead not guilty, for now, and you pray the DOJ offers you a plea deal that involves less than 20 years. Now shush Sterling stood there, mouth agape. He was being treated exactly how he had treated Marcus Thorne. He was being dismissed. He was a nuisance, a statistic. The magistrate read the charges. They went on for 5 minutes. Each count carried a maximum of 10 to 20 years. "How do you plead?" the magistrate asked. "Not guilty," Ms. Davis said mechanically. "Remanded to custody without bail." The magistrate banged the gavel. "Next." As the marshals grabbed Sterling's arms to drag him away, he turned his head toward the gallery. Sitting in the back row, wearing a simple flannel shirt and a baseball cap, was Marcus Thorne. Marcus wasn't smiling. He wasn't recording on a phone. He sat with his hands clasped, watching intently. Their eyes locked. Sterling wanted to scream at him. He wanted to blame him. But when he looked into Marcus's eyes, he saw something worse than anger. He saw pity. Marcus offered a small, solemn nod. It was a goodbye. "Move it in, mate," the marshal shoved Sterling. Sterling stumbled, his rubber sandals sliding on the floor. As he was led through the side door, back toward the van, back toward the cage, the realization finally hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't Sterling Blackwood, the Shark of Atlanta, anymore. He was just another man in an orange suit who had underestimated the wrong person. And his education was just beginning. The silence at 4200 Oakwood Drive was different now. For the last 6 months, the silence had been heavy, loaded with suspicion. It was the kind of silence that made neighbors peek through their blinds, terrified of the black SUVs that idled in the driveway at midnight. It was the silence of a crime scene waiting to happen. But today, 2 weeks after the trial that shook Fulton County to its foundations, the silence was peaceful. It was the sound of birds chirping in the old oak trees and the distant hum of a lawnmower down the street. Marcus Thorne stood on the front porch, the same porch where Gregory Halloway had lied about being threatened with a shovel. Marcus was sweeping away the dead leaves. He didn't have to do this. The government seizure team was coming in an hour. But Marcus believed in leaving a place better than he found it. He wore his signature grey flannel shirt and the worn work boots. To the casual observer, he still looked like the squatter Sterling Blackwood had sneered at. But the air around him had changed. He wasn't hunched with the weight of a cover story anymore. He stood tall, a man who had completed his watch. A screen door creaked open from the house next door. Marcus paused, leaning on the broom. It was Mrs. Higgins, an elderly woman who had spent the last half-year calling the police on him every time he put his trash cans out too early. She walked across the strip of grass separating their driveways, holding a Tupperware container covered in foil. She stopped at the foot of his porch steps, looking up at him with a mixture of embarrassment and awe. "Mr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Just Marcus. Mrs. Higgins," he said, offering a gentle smile. I wanted to bring you this," she said, holding up the container. "It's peach cobbler, my grandmother's recipe." Marcus walked down the steps and took the container. It was still warm. "You didn't have to do that, Mum." "I did," she insisted, adjusting her glasses. "I saw the news. The Journal-Constitution said you were an agent, that you stopped those men from doing whatever they were doing with that money." She looked down at her shoes. "I called you a vagrant once. I told the neighborhood watch you were trouble. I judged you because of how you dressed, and because you didn't talk much. I'm sorry, Marcus. I was wrong." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a forgiving gesture, heavy and warm. "You were protecting your home, Mrs. Higgins. That's what we do. You saw something that didn't fit, and you were alert. I can't fault you for that. Just promise me one thing." "Anything," she said. "Next time you see someone who looks like they're struggling," Marcus said, gesturing to his own worn-out clothes. Maybe offer them a plate of cobbler before you call the cops. You never know who they might be. Mrs. Higgins smiled, tears in her eyes. I will. I promise. An hour later, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. It wasn't the ominous SUVs of the cartel. It was a government-issue Ford Taurus. Agent Sarah Cole stepped out. She wasn't wearing her tactical vest today. She was in a sharp blazer, sunglasses perched on her head, holding a thick manila envelope. She walked up the driveway, her heels clicking on the pavement. She looked at the house, then at Marcus. You clean up good, Thorne, she said, nodding at the swept porch. For a guy who lived off canned beans for 6 months. Habit, Marcus shrugged. He picked up his single duffel bag. It contained everything he owned in this life, a few shirts, the boots, and the badge tucked deep in the pocket. Did you hear the update on the sentencing recommendations? Cole asked, leaning against the porch railing. I've been off the grid, Marcus said. Fill me in. Holloway cracked first, Cole said with a grim satisfaction. He gave up the offshore accounts in the Caymans to cut a deal. He's looking at 15 years, but he'll be broke when he gets out. The DOJ seized everything. The Riverwalk project is being halted and audited. And the judge? Pellington resigned yesterday. He's facing disbarment and federal bribery charges. He's trying to plead insanity, claiming Blackwood manipulated him. It's pathetic. Marcus nodded. And Sterling? What about the shark? Cole laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Sterling is having a hard time. His assets are frozen. His wife filed for divorce. And since he was denied bail, he's currently residing in Unit D of the detention center. Rumor is he's actually reading the law books in the library now, trying to help other inmates with their appeals to buy protection. Seems he finally realized that helping the uneducated is his only survival strategy. Karma is a patient teacher, Marcus murmured. He looked back at the house. The windows were dark. The secrets in the basement, the wall safe, the ledgers, the cash, were all gone, tagged into evidence. So, Marcus asked, what happens to the property? Standard auction? Some other developer comes in and bulldozes it? Cole smirked. She tapped the manila envelope against her hand. Actually, no. You made a request in your final report. You cited the Community Impact Clause. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And the director approved it, Cole said, handing him the envelope. The deed is being transferred to the Veterans Housing Initiative. This place is going to be a transition home for vets coming back from overseas who need a place to land while they get their degrees. Rent-free. Marcus took the envelope. He looked at the paperwork. He felt a lump in his throat. He thought about his own time coming back from Afghanistan, the disorientation, the feeling of not fitting in. This house, which had been a monument to greed, would now be a sanctuary for brothers and sisters in arms. Good, Marcus said, his voice thick. That's good. They got into the car. Cole took the driver's seat. Marcus sat shotgun, tossing his duffel bag into the back. As they pulled away from the curb, Marcus watched 4200 Oakwood Drive disappear in the side mirror. It was just a house again. They drove in silence for a while, navigating the winding suburban streets before hitting the highway toward Atlanta. The skyline rose in the distance, shimmering in the heat. I have to ask, Cole said, breaking the silence. She kept her eyes on the road. Shoot. In the courtroom, when Blackwood was grilling you, when he was humiliating you, you had the badge in your pocket the whole time. You could have ended it in 5 minutes. You could have walked into his office day one and flashed the credentials. She glanced at him. Why let him drag you through the mud? Why let him call you trash in front of a gallery? Marcus looked out the window. He watched the luxury cars speeding past them in the fast lane, the drivers in suits talking on their phones, oblivious to the world around them. If I had shown him the badge on day one, Marcus said softly, he would have stopped because he was afraid. He would have respected the federal authority. He would have been polite. He would have backed off. Marcus turned to look at Cole. But he wouldn't have changed. He would have gone on to bully the next person who didn't have a badge. He would have evicted the next family that couldn't fight back. Marcus leaned back in the seat, closing his eyes. I didn't want his respect, Sarah. I wanted his truth. I needed to see who he was when he thought no one was watching, when he thought he had absolute power over someone weak. The true measure of a man, Cole quoted. Exactly, Marcus said. You don't catch a predator by walking into the jungle with a siren. You catch him by looking like prey. Sterling Blackwood didn't lose because I was a federal agent. He lost because he forgot that human dignity doesn't come with a price tag. Cole nodded. She merged onto the interstate, the car accelerating. Well, she said, the prey is going to Chicago next. We have a lead on a pharmaceutical CEO who's dumping toxic waste in a low-income neighborhood. He thinks the locals are too poor to sue him. Marcus opened his eyes. A small, dangerous smile played on his lips. He adjusted his faded baseball cap. Does this CEO like to yell at people? Apparently, Cole grinned. He has quite the temper. Good, Marcus said, settling in. I love a challenge. And that, my friends, is how the suit met the jumpsuit. Sterling Blackwood spent 45 years building a tower of arrogance, thinking that his education, his money, and his connections made him a god among men. But he made the classic mistake. He judged a book by its cover. He looked at Marcus Thorne and saw a squatter, a nobody, a problem to be swept away. He didn't see the discipline, the intelligence, or the federal warrant sitting in the back pocket of those faded jeans. The story of Marcus and Sterling isn't just about a satisfying court case. It's a lesson about integrity. Integrity is what you do when you have power over someone else. Sterling used his power to crush. Marcus used his power to protect. In the end, the universe has a way of balancing the scales. The man who thought he owned the courtroom ended up in a cell, and the man he called trash turned a den of corruption into a home for heroes. It just goes to show, be careful who you step on. You never know who might be a sleeping lion. I want to know what you think. Did Sterling Blackwood get what he deserved, or was 20 years too harsh? If you were Marcus, would you have revealed your badge sooner, or would you have waited for the perfect trap like he did? Let me know in the comments section below. I read every single one. If this story gave you that satisfying feeling of justice being served, please smash that like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who need to hear these stories. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next episode. Next week, we're going to the Wild West, or at least a modern version of it. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay humble and watch your six.